Hello and welcome to Easy English Stories. Today's story explores a particular kind of modern reckoning, the sort that arrives not through a letter or a confession, but through a small plastic tube of saliva and an email notification. This story is called The Test Results I Wasn't Ready For, and it is for Level 3 learners. So listen carefully for more advanced vocabulary and longer sentence structures. Let's begin. My name is Daniel Foster. I am 31 years old and I work as a civil engineer, designing infrastructure for a mid-sized consulting firm. I mention my profession only because it matters to this story in an unexpected way. I have spent my entire career surrounded by blueprints, by structures whose every measurement can be verified, whose foundations can be trusted precisely because they are predictable. Colleagues occasionally tease me for approaching even casual conversations with an engineer's instinct for precision, always wanting the exact figures, the verified sources, the load-bearing facts beneath any given claim. I suppose, in retrospect, this made what happened to my own foundation all the more disorienting, precisely because I had never once thought to question its structural integrity. It started, as these things so often do now, with a Christmas gift. My girlfriend Priya gave me one of those home genetic testing kits, the kind that promises to reveal your ancestral origins, your predisposition towards certain traits, occasionally even distant relatives you never knew existed. I found the whole concept mildly amusing rather than significant. I spat into the small plastic tube, sealed it, mailed it off, and promptly forgot about it entirely, assuming I would eventually receive some pie chart informing me I was, unsurprisingly, mostly of Western European descent. 6 weeks later, an email arrived informing me my results were ready. I opened the app while making coffee one Saturday morning, expecting nothing more consequential than a mildly interesting breakfast diversion. The ancestry percentages appeared first, roughly matching what I had anticipated. But beneath that section was another, one I had not paid much attention to when initially reading about the service: DNA relatives, a feature that cross-references your genetic profile against others in the company's database who have also submitted samples. At the very top of this list, under a category labeled Close Family, was a name I did not recognize: Marcus Whitfield. Beside his name, the app displayed an estimated relationship, half-sibling, accompanied by a percentage of shared DNA that, according to a small informational icon I clicked with trembling hands, was statistically consistent with exactly that relationship and essentially nothing else. I stared at the screen for what must have been several minutes, coffee forgotten, growing cold on the counter beside me. I am an only child. This has been an immutable fact of my identity for 31 years, a detail so fundamental I had genuinely never thought to question it. Had built an entire understanding of my childhood around it: the quiet house, the undivided attention of my parents, the particular kind of loneliness and independence that only children often describe. And yet here, on a screen, was unambiguous genetic evidence suggesting otherwise. My first assumption, the one I clung to with something approaching desperation, was that this represented some kind of algorithmic error, a database glitch, a coincidental genetic overlap between unrelated individuals. I researched this possibility extensively that morning, reading forum posts and support articles, discovering to my dismay that these testing services are remarkably accurate when identifying close family relationships. A half-sibling match, the articles explained, is essentially unequivocal. I did not know how to proceed. My parents, Robert and Elaine Foster, had been married for 36 years, a partnership I had always regarded, perhaps naively, as a model of stability and mutual devotion. The prospect of confronting either of them with this discovery felt simultaneously urgent and utterly impossible. I sent Marcus Whitfield a brief, deliberately understated message through the platform's messaging system, explaining that the service had identified us as likely half-siblings and asking, cautiously, whether he might be open to a conversation. He responded within hours, and his message revealed almost immediately that he had been anticipating a message like mine for some time. Marcus explained that he had known for several years that his biological father was not the man who raised him. His mother, facing a serious illness several years earlier, had disclosed to him, with considerable guilt, that she had a brief relationship decades earlier with a married man, during a period when her own marriage had been in serious difficulty. That man's name, she had told him, was Robert Foster. I sat with this message for a long time before responding. The architecture of my entire family history was being quietly, invisibly redrawn, and I had not yet decided whether I possessed the fortitude to inhabit this reconstructed version of it. Marcus and I eventually spoke by video call, an experience considerably stranger than I had anticipated. He was 34 years old, 3 years my senior, and, disconcertingly, we shared certain unmistakable physical resemblances. The shape of our jaw, a particular manner of gesturing while speaking, small inherited details that felt, in that moment, like evidence I could not rationalize away even if I had wanted to. At one point during our call, he laughed at something I said, and I recognized, with an unsettling jolt, an intonation eerily similar to my father's own laugh, a small, involuntary detail neither of us could have possibly learned or imitated, given that we had never once met. Marcus was measured and considerate throughout our conversation, careful not to presume any particular outcome or relationship between us. He explained that he harbored no interest in disrupting my parents' marriage or demanding any acknowledgement from Robert. He had simply wanted, for his own sake, to understand where he came from, a motivation I found myself unable to fault, given that I was at that very moment grappling with an analogous need to understand where I had actually come from as well. The question of whether to confront my parents consumed me for several additional weeks. I vacillated constantly between competing impulses, a conviction that I deserved the truth, however uncomfortable, and a countervailing fear that surfacing this information might irreparably damage a marriage that had otherwise functioned, as far as I could observe, with genuine affection and stability for over 3 decades. Ultimately, it was my mother who noticed something was amiss. During a routine phone call, she remarked that I sounded distracted, distant in a way she found uncharacteristic. I nearly deflected the observation, as I had been doing for weeks, but something in her tone, a genuine, maternal concern rather than mere curiosity, dismantled my resolve to continue concealing what I had discovered. I told her everything: the testing kit, the unexpected match, my correspondence with Marcus, the account his mother had apparently given him regarding his conception. There was a lengthy silence on the other end of the line, long enough that I began to wonder whether the call had disconnected entirely. When my mother finally spoke, her voice carried a quality I had never previously heard from her, a kind of weary, resigned honesty, as though some long-maintained composure had finally, quietly given way. She told me she had known, or at least strongly suspected, for many years, explaining that a mutual acquaintance had mentioned, in passing, several years earlier, that my father's former colleague had given birth around the same period their affair had reportedly ended. She said she had never possessed sufficient certainty to raise the subject directly, choosing instead to carry that suspicion privately rather than risk reopening a wound both she and my father had worked so deliberately to close. According to my mother, the affair had occurred during what she described as the most difficult period of her marriage to my father, a stretch of nearly 2 years when I was still a toddler, during which my father had become distant, uncommunicative, and, she eventually discovered, involved with a colleague from his workplace. My mother had confronted him at the time. He had ended the affair, and the two of them had subsequently invested considerable effort, including a period of marriage counseling, into rebuilding their relationship. She had never known, she insisted, that the affair had resulted in a child. My father, she believed, may not have known either, though she acknowledged she could not be entirely certain of this. This revelation necessitated an altogether more difficult conversation with my father, one I approached with considerably more apprehension than the one with my mother. When I finally raised the subject with him, sitting across from him at the same kitchen table where I had eaten breakfast throughout my entire childhood, I watched an expression cross his face that I can only describe as a peculiar amalgamation of shame, shock, and something approaching relief, as though a burden he had carried privately for decades was finally, however painfully, being set down. He confirmed my mother's account almost entirely. He had not known, he insisted, that the relationship had produced a child, The affair had ended, by his account, before he became aware of any pregnancy, and the woman involved had apparently made no attempt to inform him afterward, choosing instead to raise Marcus independently. My father's shame was palpable throughout our conversation, though he did not attempt to minimize or rationalize what he had done. He simply, repeatedly, expressed regret, both for the affair itself and for the 3 decades during which a son of his had grown up without any knowledge of, or connection to, his biological father. In the months following these conversations, my family has undertaken the uncertain, occasionally awkward project of determining what relationship, if any, ought to exist between Marcus and the rest of us. My father has met with him twice now, conversations Marcus later described to me as cordial but understandably tentative. 2 men attempting to construct some form of relationship across 3 decades of complete absence. My mother, remarkably, given the circumstances, has expressed a willingness to eventually meet Marcus as well, motivated, she explained, less by any obligation toward him and more by a recognition that whatever pain his existence represents to her, none of it was ever his fault or responsibility to bear. As for myself, Marcus and I have continued communicating regularly since that initial video call. We have met in person twice, both occasions markedly less strange than I had anticipated, conversations that gradually revealed a genuine, if still developing, sense of familiarity. I would not yet describe what exists between us as a conventional sibling relationship. That likely requires considerably more time than several months can provide. But I no longer regard him as a stranger either. He occupies some newly created category in my understanding of my own family, one for which I had no prior framework whatsoever. What this experience has taught me, more than anything else, is that family, despite our tendency to regard it as something fixed and foundational, something we can rely upon with the same certainty as a verified engineering measurement, is in fact considerably more fluid and more susceptible to revision than most of us ever anticipate. The narrative I had constructed regarding my own origins for 31 years was not, strictly speaking, false, but it was substantially incomplete, missing an entire structural element I never knew to account for. The story of Marcus's discovery, and my own, is becoming increasingly common in an era when genetic testing has made such revelations considerably more accessible than at any previous point in human history. Online forums dedicated entirely to these experiences have grown substantially in recent years, filled with people navigating strikingly similar territory, newly discovered siblings, biological parents who were never who they claimed to be, entire branches of family trees quietly rewritten by a single spit sample and an algorithm. Secrets that families once maintained with reasonable confidence, secure in the assumption that biology itself would keep their confidence, can now surface through nothing more dramatic than a holiday gift and a curious afternoon spent reviewing an app. Now it's time to learn vocabulary from today's story. Reckoning means a difficult reconciliation with the truth about something. Example: this story explores a particular kind of modern reckoning. Predisposition means a natural tendency toward something. Example: the test claimed to reveal genetic predispositions. Immutable means unable to be changed. Example: being an only child felt like an immutable fact. Unequivocal means completely clear, leaving no doubt. Example: a close match is essentially unequivocal. Fortitude means courage and strength in facing difficulty. Example: I had not decided whether I possessed the fortitude to continue. Vacillate means to move indecisively between different options. Example: I vacillated constantly between competing impulses. Countervailing means opposing or balancing an effect with an equal but opposite force. Example: a countervailing fear held me back. Amalgamation means a combination or mixture of different things. Example: his face showed an amalgamation of shame and relief. Palpable means so intense it seems almost physically perceptible. Example: his shame was palpable throughout the conversation. Tentative means uncertain or hesitant, not fully confirmed. Example: their conversations were cordial but tentative. Fluid means capable of changing or flowing rather than being fixed. Example: family is more fluid than we tend to assume. Try to use these words in your own sentences. That is one of the best ways to remember them, especially at this more advanced level. Now it's time for shadowing practice. Listen and repeat after me. Speak slowly, clearly, and with feeling. A simple gift changed the shape of my entire family. One name on a screen I did not recognize. I am an only child, I had always believed. The truth had been quietly waiting for decades. My mother's voice carried a weary kind of honesty. For decades, my mother's voice carried a weary kind of honesty. My father's shame was impossible to hide. Family is more fragile than we like to believe, and somehow, we are still finding our way forward. Practice these lines several times. Try to capture both the meaning and the emotional weight of each sentence. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Easy English Stories. I hope this story helped you practice more advanced English while sitting with something genuinely relevant to modern family life. Now, I have a few questions for you. Would you want to know a secret like this, even if uncovering it might complicate your family relationships? Do you think Daniel's parents made the right decision by eventually telling him the truth? Have you or anyone you know ever taken a DNA test that revealed something unexpected? Please write your answers in the comments. I would love to read your thoughts. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Take care, keep learning, and see you next time on Easy English Stories.